As a homeschooler, I often look at these other examples on YouTube or homeschool moms in other places, and they're talking about their schedules and their routines. And as a ministry partner, wife, schedules and routines, what are you talking about?
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. I am back with my new friend, Abby Joy, and I am so glad you are back with us. We are going to talk today about a few things, but one of the things we're going to talk about is homeschooling and being part of ministry. She is a pastor's wife, and so I know whether you're a pastor's wife or you're someone who's involved in ministry in another way, that can add just a whole different element of crazy to your life and to your family. So we're going to talk about those things today. But before we get back into it, I want to say thank you again to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. We are so grateful for our sponsors. You guys, we really are. Do you know that without our sponsors, we would not be able to do this podcast? And without our sponsors and without those of you who support us financially, we would not be able to do this podcast. So we are so thankful for them and for you. If you're looking for a great homeschool curriculum for any grade, any subject, any age, check out bjupresshomeschool.com, and they've got something for you. They will truly equip you for a successful homeschool journey, and they'll give you the tools that you need that are rooted in a solid biblical foundation to teach your kids about Jesus and point them to Christ in whatever subject it is that you are teaching them. So check them out, bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Abby Joy, welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. It is such a joy getting to know you this week. Let's talk about ministry because you are a pastor's wife. And so I know ministry is a huge part of your world and all the things that you do. Talk about what that looks like and maybe bring some encouragement to families because I know a lot of homeschool families are involved in ministry.
Yeah. So I think as a homeschooler, I often look at these other examples on YouTube or homeschool moms in other places, and they're talking about their schedules and their routines. And as a ministry partner, wife, schedules and routines, what are you talking about? We get people stopping by our house randomly all the time, or we get called out to do things. And I love doing that. I can't remember who said it in their book, but they talk about putting people before the plan. And that is something my family has really clung to, that before our homeschool routines or plans or whatever we have going on, if there is a ministry need, I mean, that's part of educating our kids too, right? Teaching them that people come first and being able to serve and being willing to give up whatever we were doing to go out and do that. So we are incredibly flexible with our homeschool routines and when things happen. And we might start early, although as a pastor's family, we don't always have to start early. So sometimes we might start quite a bit later, and that might go through the evening with our homeschooling whenever we can get it done. And so we've kind of leaned into more even calling it habits. These are the habits that we want to have in our day. And then whenever they fit in, we get them done. So it's going to look different for everybody in ministry and whatever you have going on, but remaining flexible is really important with that.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of homeschool families in your church?
So I'm incredibly blessed, and yes, I do. In fact, we have so many homeschool families in our church that I think some of those that go to public school, the couple that do, they can really feel switch. They feel like they're on the outside. And I have a huge support community. That's a large part of why I want to encourage people online and in other places too, because I know that not everybody has that. Right. And I want to be able to help others that need that community. But it is a weird balance in our church too of, we homeschool and we support homeschooling. And we do believe that if you can do it, it is the biblical response to raising our children. That being said, there are also many situations that's not a possibility because sin has infiltrated our world and we live with consequences and other things. That's not a reality for everyone. So we always want to show that we still love and support people and their choices of education for their family and what is right for them. We don't ever want that to be a dividing thing. And so sometimes I think that is something my husband and I really try to kind of struggle with, because I am known, right, as the homeschooler who does the Facebook and the YouTube channel. And then I host homeschool retreats. And so is that really who I am. No, I'm a
Right.
Christian first, right? And
Yeah.
I'm your sister in Christ. And I want to be there to support you also, but I have been called in this way. And so
Right.
that can get really sticky and confusing helping people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly can, whether it's people in your church or your neighbors, And I mean, all you can do is share your story and why God has called
Right.
you to homeschooling and talk about the blessings and the benefits. But at the same time, be real about it. As we talked about on Monday, like it's
Mhm.
okay to be real about our struggles. And,
Absolutely.
one of my greatest fears with this podcast is that people will think that I'm this perfect homeschool mom and I have it all together. And my girls are, I mean, my girls are amazing, but that, they're academically prepared in every way. And that, somehow I'm this like super homeschool mom. And I'm like,
Mm.
nope, we're just regular family, just like you, just like
Yeah.
everyone else. And God is working
Yeah.
in us and through us, just like he is with everyone else. And so just being able to be real about that.
So we've had to combat that in a lot of ways. Like people don't want
Yeah.
to be like even friends with the pastor's family because
Right.
like you might be held to different standards or you're
Right.
not good enough or whatever. And like we've really had to try to tear down those walls. Now we've been here for 9 years and I would say those walls are pretty well torn down. Like
Yeah.
people know our flaws and
Yeah.
I am so thankful for our church family that they still love us and are
Yeah.
there for us. But that did take time to just say like, we mess up and we do things wrong and be embarrassed when we mess up publicly and
Right.
publicly apologize. There's
Right.
a lot of humility that comes along with being in a pastor's family if you're doing it right. And also to being a public figure, that's homeschooling too, right?
Yeah.
And admitting, and I think we are called to not just share all of the good, but to share some of those background things too. And I've kind of used my Instagram a little bit like that more so to like show like, hey, here's what the background looks like. Here's how I actually have my camera set up. And here's why I'm angled this way and not that way.
Right.
Like, and trying to be a little bit more real in that. I think as ministry families too, and because I grew up as a pastor's kid, I realized that people are watching. People are always watching.
Yeah.
And I knew that early on. And I could have gone either direction with it, but I really try super hard to be intentional with the things that I'm doing, the reasons why I'm doing it. I think families need to be really intentional and open with their children on why are you doing the things that you are doing. And then like curriculum that we use. Why are we using that curriculum? Is it something that really glorifies God? Is it something that I would encourage others to use? Because I get asked all the time from
Yeah.
the other moms in our church or in our area, what curriculum are you using? And while there's lots of great curriculums out there, there might be some that I wouldn't recommend too. And I want to be intentional with
Yeah.
what I am promoting as well, because people are always watching. Even if you're not a ministry family, people are watching you and they are observing your family.
Yeah. Yep. They absolutely are. People watch everything that you do. And most importantly, your kids are watching everything that you
Yes.
do as well. And
They know your heart, right?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our kids can read us like a book. It's kind of crazy and scary sometimes, that our kids know us so well. But the reason they know us so well is because we're home with them.
Right.
And we often talk about how we get to know our kids so well because we homeschool them. But the flip side is true too, where our kids know us. They know our weaknesses. They know our strengths. They know, what makes mom upset, what makes mom happy. They know all the things. And so, it's,
and there's no point in hiding that. Like,
no,
let's be real. Let's share that, right? Like, oh, mom messed up. Like, mom needs to stop and pray for a minute. Hold on a second. Like, those are really important things. And those are the things that are teaching our children. They see when we're like, oh, so-and-so needs help again. I have to go help them. Like, no, like they need to see the authentic, like, well, this is what we're called to do. And we want to show them the love of God and the grace of God as well. And so that authenticity there of like your real relationship with your Father in heaven is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the most important thing. So let's take a break. We'll be right back. We want to thank all our sponsors for making this show possible. BJU Press Homeschool, CTC Math, and Apologia. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Visit the show notes for links to these great companies and thank them for supporting the Schoolhouse Rock podcast. We are back with Abby Joy. Abby, have you, your family, we talked about ministry before the break. Has your family always been called to ministry? I mean, you're a pastor's daughter and now you're a pastor's wife. Did you and your husband go into your marriage feeling like you were called to ministry together?
Yeah, so we actually met at Bible school, and at that time, I wasn't going to marry a pastor. Like, no
Right,
pastor's
right.
kid wants to marry a pastor. But then I met this guy, and he had ticked all the boxes, and he was on fire for God, and he was going to be a pastor. And actually, we found that we were a really good team together.
Mm.
Our relationship is really based off of friendship, and we were friends for quite a while before we pursued anything else. But yeah, I always knew he was going to go into ministry, and I was actually getting a psychology degree, and I wanted to just like volunteer, help people and serve and never make money. So that's pretty much ministry too. um and and yeah, I just trusted God that like this was the match and the team that we were supposed to be. So we've been at our church now for 9 years, but a couple of years ago, actually, we felt called to go into the mission field specifically. And that was a really cool situation where my husband was gone with the youth group, and felt God's calling there that, like, man, missions. I think God's calling us to missions. I think in the next 2 years, we're probably going to get that calling. Like, it wasn't an instant calling. It was just like, I need to have my heart open to this. He came
Yeah.
back from that trip. I hadn't been with him. We hadn't really talked because, teenagers and late nights and everything. And when he told me that, I was like, no way. God told me the same thing while you were gone. Like,
Oh,
it is
wow.
coming. And so like a year went by, another half a year, and I started getting a little antsy. I was really excited. I have families that my grandparents were missionaries, and I had
Okay.
kind of always thought maybe there would be something there, and started pursuing that route. And we got hooked up with an organization. And from the very beginning, I specified like, hey, we homeschool. We want to go overseas. Like, we're definitely looking for a country that would allow us to homeschool, where we can minister as a family and be involved and help wherever we are needed. We don't want to go to like the popular hotspots. Like, we want to go
Right.
where there's actually a need. And so that was going really well. 9 months into it, we were starting to sell things off because we'd been in ministry so long, we were able to like expedite the process quite a
Yeah.
bit. And everything was going well. Yeah, we were like selling stuff off. We were getting prepared. We met all of our like, yep, check that, all of the interviews approved. And then they said, okay, so actually though, you can't homeschool the first 2 years because we need you to
Oh.
like be deeply involved in learning the language, and you're not going to have time. You're not going to
Oh,
have time for
wow.
your kids, right? and and so they need to go off to school somewhere else, whether that's like a local school where they would be taught by Muslims, or an international school where they wouldn't necessarily learn the language and they just hang out with other international kids, or you could like send them to a boarding school. And my husband and I were just like, no, like
Oh,
this
wow.
isn't the plan. What do you mean? And so we understood like, oh, they don't really know what homeschooling looks like. They don't really understand this. Okay, so we wrote our petitions for that. And we went through a lot of process for about another 2 to 3 months, trying to convince like, no, we can make this work. This is what we feel called to. Please work with us in
Yeah.
this. And the end result was that they said, look, we accept your family, but we're not going to accept homeschooling for those first 2 years.
Wow.
After that, you can. But there's so much that's going on in those 2 years, especially when you're moving
Wow.
to a new country and you're
Right.
changing everything in your
How
kids'
scary that would
lives.
be for your kids.
Yeah, and like that's not teaching them that we're part of a team and
Right.
like you're included in this ministry with
Yeah.
us. And my husband and I just had to say no. And there were
Wow.
more things that went into that too. But that was really one. I mean, there was broken trust, right? We'd gone through
Yeah.
this process for 9 months, and then they told us about this policy.
Wow.
And but like I think also there, what it really showed me during that time was how much even Christians don't understand homeschooling.
Yeah.
They don't understand or value having your children home with you, and the
Yeah.
ministry that you can do as a family, raising your children up in the ways of the Lord, the calling to raising our children and educating them from home in God's ways. There's just such a disconnect in some of that.
Yeah.
And so I think a large part of like why I wanted to continue YouTube, but take it in this direction of family style and sharing more of what we do with homeschooling, was to show like
Right.
it doesn't take 8 hours, and it is very involving, like
Right.
with our family. And I don't know. So it was a really heartbreaking time.
Yeah.
And we needed healing after that. And then God changed a lot of circumstances in our lives. My father-in-law moved near us. There were other things that happened. And God really blessed. Like, we remained faithful where we were. And we just saw a lot of great things happen too. And we haven't refelt that calling. We did say, like, after a while, we might like pursue that again if we felt called to it. We
Sure.
haven't felt that calling at this point. The door's not closed. But we just feel a really big peace about where we are and how God is
Yeah.
currently using us.
It's so interesting because I think oftentimes in our lives, God will call us to do something and he's just calling us to obedience,
Yeah.
right? It's like Abraham sacrificing Isaac, right? He just called him to be obedient.
Mm,
And then the Lord said, that's not actually the plan, but I just want you to be obedient in what I'm asking you to do.
mm,
And so for you and your husband, he was saying, okay, I'm calling you to do this. I want you to be obedient to me. You did that. And then he took a bit of a different turn,
Yeah.
with a lot of a different turn with the plan. And you know what? That's God's prerogative. That is his right. And when you're following him, there's so much peace on either end of it. You had peace about going on the mission field.
Yeah.
But how amazing that you went through all this process. I'm sure he taught you a ton of stuff through it. I'm sure it was a really hard process to go through, especially when you had to pull the plug and say, we're not doing this and then I'm certain that God gave you peace about having your family unified and being together as a family and keeping your family intact that way.
Yeah. And that verse that you were talking about with Abraham sacrificing Isaac, right? Like that one so often gets used wrong. Like, sacrifice your children on the altar of ministry. I can't believe people still say that. Like, that's not a thing. Like, you are told over and over and over again, like, to care for your children, to raise them in the ways of the Lord, to, Ephesians talks about your relationship with your children, right? And your children to your parents. And like, that's not a thing. And yet it still is continually brought up. Like, well, somebody else can raise your kids, but you're going to go do ministry.
Right.
No.
Yeah. No. God gave you your kids for you to be the one to raise them up in fear and admonition of him, of the Lord.
Absolutely.
No one else is going to do it like you. I mean, it's
no
missionary
one knows your
or
children
not.
Like you, right? No one.
Yeah.
God gave you your children. You are qualified to raise them. Like, they're yours. Nobody is a student of your children like you. Nobody loves them like you do. Like,
that's right.
Absolutely not.
No, I'm right there with you. So let's talk about family unity real quick, because as you, as a family, have learned to be unified, you and your husband, of course, are first unified in your decisions that you're making, whether to pastor or go on the mission field or not go on the mission field, your decision to homeschool. But then you bring your 4 boys into your world of ministry, into your world of homeschooling and serving and all of those things. How can you encourage families to be unified in the things that they're doing and to know what God is calling them to do as a family?
So this is something I talk about a lot on the Made to Homeschool platform. If you go over there's a whole community that membership to become part of. And then on every Tuesday, I kind of gear conversation towards this because it's so much of my heart. One of the first things that we tackled, though, was, how do you develop family unity? Like, what is the main thing you're going after? And so if you've ever been on a sports team or you've gone on a short-term missions trip, right? Like, you suddenly get really united with those people and you feel like really connected because you're all going for the same goal. You all have the same end in mind. And so as we have our children join us, we are very vocal on what we're doing. Now, some of that's already laid out for us in the Bible. Like, our family vision is to love God, love others, and to make disciples of all nations, right? Like, those are commands in the Bible. Like, that's a very basic thing. So that's like our overall. Then we have our family mission. And my husband and I feel very called to family ministries. Now, we might go about that a little bit different in like what we're doing day to day, whether I'm on YouTube or he's in the pulpit. But we are continually spurring one another on. We're looking for opportunities as a family to help develop family unity in other places. And we bring our kids along with that. So we've done a lot of marital counseling, premarital counseling. And there's been times when we've had to tell our boys, like, hey, this is something that we do as a family, and they have kids. Like, we need you to play with their kids, even if they're like significantly younger than you or whatever's going on. Like, you guys get to play with them while mom and dad have these conversations. Or doing other things. We do bread walks in our community. We do, there's a ministry that we represent at like a local craft show. There's ways that we're going out and doing things as a family, and we bring our kids into that and show them how this fits in to like our family mission and what we want to do.
Yeah.
And they feel like part of the team. Kids want to know that they are valuable, right?
Yeah.
Like that you aren't just like serving them. Like the world isn't about them. The world's about God and bringing him glory. And we invite our kids to do that with us. And so sometimes like even with like chores, or we call them helping hands time, like our family works together. You're part of this family. That's a blessing. You get to help out with this. And so we're just very verbal on like what we are doing together, why we are doing it. And we're very intentional about those things.
It's such a great way to raise kids today, because I feel like so many people have grown up to be narcissists in a lot of ways. And I see more and more of that. And I'm like you just want to shake them and say, it's not all about you, you know? But when we bring our kids into ministry, when we're unified as a family, and when we're serving the Lord together, it really does help them to understand that it's not all about them. You know, some of it is about them. Some of life is about them. We have to focus on them too, but it's not all about them. It's all about Jesus. And what is he calling us to do as a family? So I think that is just a fantastic way to teach our kids how to serve.
Yeah. I asked some families, one of my favorite things to do when I find a family that I really respect and I've seen their children grow up, and I love to ask like, what was your secret sauce? Like, what did you do? And I've gotten different answers throughout the years that have been really fun to get to talk about and dive into. But one of my favorite answers was that we included them in service. And so like whether they're all serving at the church at the same event and they're like together as a family, participating in children's ministry, or we host a Thanksgiving meal for free in our community at our church. And so the kids will serve that Thanksgiving meal while their parents are helping to make it. Or going to something like Feed My Starving Children or these other things, like bringing them along in serving others. And it's so important. And I do think that there is a lot there with teaching our kids that it's not about them, but they are invited and they are included in the family.
Right.
And when they become a Christian, they don't receive like a mini Holy Spirit, right? They are a Christian. They get the whole thing too. And so not belittling their thoughts on things too, like asking them questions. What do you think about this? And what stuck out to you with the sermon today? And having those conversations and letting them feel valued in that.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
It is. It's so much fun. I love parenting. It's so much fun.
Too.
It's so fun that we get to do this with our kids.
Oh, doesn't it break your heart when people say like, I could never homeschool, or I could never be with my kids all day? I think 2020 broke my heart when people were just like, when do they get to go back to school? No. Oh my goodness. They're my best friends. Like, it's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, I have a whole theory on that. And I have said this for years and years. People who say that they don't want to be with their kids because their kids drive them crazy, it's because they're not the ones raising their kids. Their kids are being raised by a school system that, for the most part, if they're in public school, hates God and hates families. And then you wonder why you don't like your kids, because you're not the one raising them most of the time. And so raise your kids, raise them to love Jesus, raise them to, be part of your family culture and serve as a family. I mean, there just are so many benefits to homeschooling. So we're going to talk more about those benefits when we come back tomorrow. We are out of time. Abby, tell our listeners one more time where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Family Style Learning on YouTube, Bear Hill Adventures on YouTube a little bit, Instagram, Made to Homeschool.
Okay.
All the places.
I'll put all those notes, all those in the show notes so you guys can find them easily. Stay tuned to the very end to hear what's coming up next on the podcast. And if you have not left a review for the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast, would you please, pretty please, with sprinkles and a cherry and whipped cream on top, would you please take just a few minutes and leave a review? Let people know why they should listen to it. And if you are watching this on YouTube, comment on there. We try to respond to those as quickly and as often as we can, but we love to know how the podcast is being a blessing to you and just how we can better serve you. We are here to serve you and to be a blessing to you. So we love you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Bye.
A mom said to me one time, "Aren't you worried about sheltering your children?" And I said to her, we care more about sheltering tomato plants in the culture right now than we do about our precious children. And so if someone wants to accuse me of sheltering my children, my answer is always absolutely yes. I will shelter my child until I know my child can stand up against the elements of the culture so that they can grow to maturity. And we slowly begin to remove the shelter from around them as we see that they are mature and that they understand the battle lines around them and can engage the culture from a position of strength rather than weakness.
So when we're looking at education in light of eternity, one thing I think we need to stop asking when we look at curriculums is, does it meet state standards? Or how am I going to fulfill these different things? Like,
who cares?
Who cares? Like, okay, if you live in a state where you have to, like, we've got creative ways to do that.
Sure.
But, like, that's not my end goal. My citizenship is in heaven, right? My children, I want their citizenship to be in heaven. And so the things that are most important to me are that they learn about their creator. And yes, we're going to learn history because God wove that whole story.
That's right.
And we're going to learn about science. But let's understand, like, God's creativity in that. And even math, like apologia math, generations math. I like Fred, it doesn't necessarily teach about God, but I love wordy maths that explain to you why you need to know something in a practical sense. Apologia and generations really teach God and how he used math and uses math to like set order to things. That's right. It is so cool. There are so many great options out there. Why would you settle for something that leaves God out of the picture? God is in every picture. He is part of it all.